A very good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on wherever you are. It gives me enormous joy to greet all of you on behalf of Cosmos Foundation to our very popular Ambassadors Lecture Series. Today, our subject will be on Bangladesh-European Union relations, prognosis for the future. In particular, it is an honor for us to have Ambassador Renier Tering back in our program as a keynote speaker, and she has been with us before. Ambassador Renier Tering has contributed phenomenally during her tenure to furthering and expanding relations qualitatively. She has a huge fan club in Bangladesh. It is with much sadness that we learn that her stint in Dhaka is about to come to a close. In the years that she has spent amongst us, she has labored relentlessly to widen and deepen Bangladesh's cooperation with the European Union. The European Union was founded on the values of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and respect for human rights, including those of minorities. These enlightened values are held to be integral to the European way of life, and rightly so, since Europe was the home of the Enlightenment. Originating out of a vision for a long-term peace on a continent that has been the principal battleground for 2 world wars in the first half of the 20th century, the EU has been an engine for peace and harmony between nations. This work culminated in the 2012 Nobel Peace Prize that was awarded to the EU in recognition of over 6 decades contributed to the advancement of peace and reconciliation, democracy, and human rights. Diplomatic relations between the EU and Bangladesh were established in 1973, following the first round of EU enlargement that saw it expand from 6 to 9 countries. Before the EU as a force for good on the world stage really started gathering momentum and asserting itself around the time of its 4th enlargement, which was in 1995. The European Union has been one of Bangladesh's closest partners since the nascence of our country. Today, we see you as supporting us in several key challenges facing us in Bangladesh. 1, our continued efforts at addressing the structural problems of poverty. 2, good governance that affect the efficient and effective delivery of services. 3, the diversification of our manufacturing capabilities. And 4, the improvement of the enabling environment for doing business. Today, as we are poised to graduate out of the list of least developed countries, we will doubtless be looking to our friends in the European Union for assistance. In the post-Brexit period, our collaboration may of course require appropriate fine-tuning. We are all well aware of the significance of the European market for our growth and development. Expanded market access is of critical for our progress. It is our hope that our negotiations will yield results that are mutually beneficial. The purpose of the events such as this would be to reflect on relevant issues with regards to the subject at hand and do some brainstorming. We have been able to collect some very bright minds in our community for that purpose. Dr. Debopriya Bhattacharya, Distinguished Fellow of the Center for Policy, Dr. Rubana Haq, former President of BGMEA and Chairperson of Mohammadi Group, Dr. Zaidi Sattar, Founder and Chairman of the Policy Research Institute, and Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, International Relations Department at Dhaka University, and Ambassador Tariq Karim, who served in some of Bangladesh's Foreign Ministry's most important posts. He is currently the Director of Bay of Bengal Studies at IUB and Honorary Advisor Emeritus of Cosmos Foundation. It is my fervent hope that our deliberations will produce the desired results. In order to chair and conduct our proceedings today, we have with us Bangladeshi scholar diplomat Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Chaudhry, former Foreign Affairs Advisor and President of Cosmos Foundation. It is with great pleasure now that I hand over the microphone to Dr. Chaudhry. Over to Dr. Chaudhry.
Thank you, Inayat. Thank you for those remarks and also for setting the tone of today's discussions on Bangladesh-EU relations. We are delighted to have with us Ambassador Rohingya Assistance and a star-studded panel to share our thoughts, their thoughts with us. I thank them profusely. Now, let me just make 3 quick points. First, historically, Europe has had a huge contribution towards how nation states organize themselves on the global matrix. The modern nation state was the product of the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. Now, 3 centuries down the line and 2 world wars later, European thinkers and policymakers saw merit in integration among states on the basis of common interests and issues. This led to the evolution of the European Union. Ever since, the EU has been a beacon to follow for those aspiring to similar purposes, thereby leading to the establishment of regional organizations like SAARC and the ASEAN. So, in this area of integration of sovereign states, Europe has been a thought leader. Second, Europe believes its strength lies in soft power emanating from its core European values. Now, these values are an amalgam of Europe's rich intellectual and social traditions, both revolutionary and evolutionary. Now, this helps Bangladesh's engagement with contemporary Europe because the values that shape Bangladesh's own liberation are similar. We believe them to be critical to obtaining for the Bangladeshi people a better quality of life. These pertain to pluralism, justice, development of all, including the marginalized, and empowerment of women and girls. Hence, I believe Bangladesh-EU cooperation is a natural outcome of the commonalities that we share. Now, this makes for enduring relationship. The third point is a global one. From my own modest insight into geopolitics of the future, there'll be 3 major players shaping our destiny: the United States, China, and Europe, though not necessarily in that order. Sadly, we appear to be heading for a world veering towards confrontation rather of key protagonists rather than collaboration. From my observation perch in Singapore, I perceive that developing Asia, including Bangladesh, does not want to be a stalking horse for one or the other's negative agenda. Now, developing Asia believes in a cooperative universe, and we believe that Bangladesh-Europe relationship can act as an example of a cross-group cooperation which would be worthy of emulation. I thank you. Now, without further ado, I would invite our keynote speaker, Ambassador Rohingya Assistance, to take the microphone. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ifti. Always such a pleasure and inspiration to listen to you. And again, I'm quite awed to indeed see this star-studded panel today. And not only I think you represent the finest minds here in Bangladesh, but I can also boast that many of you was friends. So it's an extremely big pleasure for me to be here this morning. And I also want to briefly introduce our friend Toto. He is our new press officer at the delegation, Tawhid Feroz. So also welcome to you and thank you. It's been great since you have been joining our delegation. I think Ifti, you
Thank you, madam. My pleasure.
Pleasure. And I think Ifti, you have really put the finger on not only issues that are relevant for EU-Bangladesh's relations, but also the larger geopolitical context, which, as we all know, is in a flux. And that is also something I will briefly address in my talk today. I know that I have about 30 minutes, so I will keep a close watch on the time. The way I wanted to structure my talk today is, first of all, go a little bit into the latest on our relationship. And here I think it's important to put out to report what the EU is doing with Bangladesh at the moment, what the EU is doing in terms of COVAX. Then I want to speak a little bit on the new GSP regulation, which will be very important for Bangladesh. Also what we're planning for our development cooperation agenda in the coming years and how that will affect Bangladesh. And then in the end, look at the wider agenda and talk a little bit on the Indo-Pacific strategy, which we are developing, and that should be finalized by September. And of course, that also will inform our relations with the larger region, and of course also with Bangladesh. Yes, so let me start maybe with the pandemic. It was my great pleasure already to have participated in one of the Cosmos dialogues, and I still remember how we were sitting at the Cosmos Foundation in person, the interaction we had, a lot of quite a big public. And who would have thought that still 1.5 years into the pandemic, we would still be doing these kind of meetings by Zoom. It's just an indication how everyone is being impacted by this. Let me maybe briefly start by reacting to one article that appeared in the press yesterday. Maybe most of you have seen it. The Honorable Foreign Minister Momen referred to the EU in quite disappointing terms, saying that the EU actually is not doing much in terms of the distribution of vaccines. They should do, I mean, we always talk about human rights, but when it comes to actually helping out the countries, we're not really putting the money where our mouth is. So I wanted therefore to start this talk by giving you a little bit of more hard facts of what the EU is actually doing in the whole COVAX program. So basically, it's true that we have been focusing very much on Africa. So what is the plan under the COVAX of what we call Team Europe? Team Europe is, of course, the Commission and all the 27 member states working together and putting together our budget to address the pandemic. So we will share about 200 million vaccine doses before the end of this year. Also, there is an important initiative on manufacturing and access to vaccines in Africa, which is backed by €1 billion from the EU budget and the European Investment Bank. And I think what is important to note is that the Pasteur Institute in Dakar, Senegal, with the help of the European Union, will start building a plant, a vaccine production plant, which really will reduce Africa's dependence on vaccine imports by 99%. And so this will strengthen the resilience of the African continent in terms of the pandemic. So I think we can say actually that the EU has been the driving force behind the global response to COVID-19. And the pledges the EU and its member states through Team Europe has done is for about 16 billion euros. So I mean, let's not underestimate how we, in fact, also want to reach out to the developing countries. For Bangladesh, we promised 10 million doses. We are aware that it is not enough, and I hope that we can provide more. But it's, of course, not in the hands of the EAS. It's also in the hand of the humanitarian assistance. But we will continue to really push for that. But let me just say that the EU is the second larger contributor to COVAX with over 2.4 billion euros so far. And the new pledge is, of course, as I said, 16 billion. And so these pledges are made for universal access to tests, treatment and vaccines, against the virus and for the global recovery as well. So how does this, if we want to split up this 16 billion, where does it all go? 6.15 billion are additional funding to help develop and ensure equitable access to coronavirus vaccines, tests, and treatments. And this money raised will also support economic recovery in the world's most fragile regions and communities. And I think just to point back to Bangladesh, we have already seen how, for example, through our social protection program, we have front-loaded money to help workers that were fragilized and laid off in the garment sector. Yes, this is just to counter a little bit the sentiment, which is, of course, on the one hand understandable, but on the other hand, I think maybe not very justified that the EU is not as generous as is perceived. So that is why I wanted to address this. Secondly, our new programming for the coming 7 years is coming to an end. Worldwide, we see a little bit of reduction of our support to some of the countries. And in Bangladesh, we will have a budget of some 605 million euros. But this will not include all the regional activities we also have. For example, the continuation of support to the Rohingya crisis, disaster risk reduction, migration, etc., which will be also pledged from a regional budget. So basically, our support will remain looking at the sectors we already had for many years. So that is human capital development, public finance management, good governance, etc. But I want to also point out two important programs that we call our Team Europe initiatives. And one is on green inclusive development, and the other one on social protection and decent work. These two, I think, are really our flagship programs. And let me maybe start on the human capital development. Team Europe initiatives on decent work have been identified following the country assessment in Bangladesh in consultation also with the national authorities and the Bangladesh's 5-year plan, civil society, private sector, etc. And so possible interventions, what do we want to do with this Team Europe initiative approach? So first of all, it's a support to the design and the implementation of employment policy focused on the creation of decent jobs. It's also to strengthen social protection mechanism in the country for workers in line with minimum international standards. It's support for demand-driven skills, training and lifelong learning opportunities. And here again, this tallies very well with all the funds we have been investing in Bangladesh in education and vocational training over the last decades. It also involves support to improve the working environments, health and safety measures in the workplace, plus promoting accountability and transparency in economic governance and advocating for human rights and social dialogue, and also support to labor market research through studies and other initiatives. Here again, I foresee that we will be working closely also with the ILO, as we have done so far, and contracting a number of technical studies. So this is, I think, is going to be a very, very important program. And I would be especially interested to hear from Deb and Rubana how they see this. I think another very, very important sector where we absolutely need to all work together is, of course, the green inclusive development. We have seen how Bangladesh, of course, is still one of the most vulnerable countries in climate change. But we also have seen this summer that how, for example, Europe is already similarly, well, not on the same scale, but seeing the results of what climate change means. And for us, the floods that took place in the summer in Belgium and in Germany were really an important warning sign. If we look at the Mediterranean, which is on fire in the south of Italy, in Greece, in Eastern Europe, I think these are signs that we all really need to step up our efforts. And here I think we can say that the EU is leading the initiative at the moment. If we look at the major partners around the globe, the Commission has just, and that was actually a good coincidence, in the course of late July, announced its Fit for 55 program, which is going to have a lot of impact in all the member states. It's really very stringent measures to address climate change. And one, of course, big ambition is for the European Union to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. From 2030, there would not be any more combustion engines in the EU. And I think another important measure, which already has had some protests at the WTO, is the announcement of a carbon border adjustment mechanism. And I think this is important because if we want to really support European industries that make the green transition, we cannot allow, of course, products from that were produced in outside of Europe under less stringent measures to come in, because that would, of course, be unfair competition. So the carbon border alignment mechanism is going to be quite a game changer, I think, in this respect. So what does it mean for Bangladesh? In fact, in Bangladesh, we have looked at green energy transition, where we, for the moment, in the Team Europe approach, plan to invest some 60 million euro, which action is currently under development. And it aims to support Bangladesh to build a power system which covers a maximum of the country's energy demand through renewable energy sources, while at the same time reducing greenhouse gases emissions, energy consumption and demand through an increased energy efficiency. So this program will cover both generation, transmission, distribution, as well as utilization, while linking it to the Team Europe initiative Green Energy Transition. And a preliminary project assessment meeting is already scheduled for early September. So we really hope that this will make an impact. There are also like-minded non-EU countries that participate. Norway and Switzerland are very interested. So what other possible interventions we could look at is facilitate sector reform through audits, business climate, adapting pricing and removing harmful subsidies, etc. Also operations to promote and install innovative renewable energy, such as solar, floating, irrigation, offshore wind, I think very underutilized still in Bangladesh, and waste to energy. Also support the rehabilitation and upgrade of grids to integrate renewable energy. Again, I think for Dhaka, extremely important in terms of air quality, a support to energy efficiency in brick kilns, climate smart interventions at the industry level for selected value change for resource efficiency, support the private sector also to solve the distribution losses, enhance grid integration, and of course, solar. The argument always has been there is not enough space in Bangladesh to really go full out here, but we could look at solar rooftops, for example, in public buildings. And then also, again, support research, very important, and studies on innovative low carbon technology. So this is, in a nutshell, I mean, it sounds very ambitious, but I think We don't need to give a lot of money. It's, I think, just also transfer of technology, helping Bangladesh to get there. And I think it's for the country, it's really also going to be a game changer. Finally, also from my own personal interest, I think we should do much more to obviously protect the Sundarbans. I was sad to read recently that Cyclone Amphan has really devastated much more than we thought in terms of saline intrusion and harming the tree cover. So there's a lot to be done as well also with, for example, the shipment of coal through this very, very fragile environment. So this is a little bit in terms of what we see in the short term and longer term in our development cooperation strategy. Of course, we will continue to work on migration. I think what we have done so far is not only look at illegal migrants in Bangladesh and their returnees, but especially work with IOM and BRAC to make sure that those who are returned to the country don't come empty-handed, but have actually an opportunity for a useful livelihoods, and so that they avoid to be trapped by human traffickers in the future, because we all know migration is necessary. It's a reality, but it should be safe and voluntary. It shouldn't be unsafe migration in the hands of people traffickers. So that's also, of course, always going to be in the coming years a part of our cooperation. So yeah, migration is part of that, also in a regional perspective. So yeah, this of course, human rights and good governance is a cross-cutting issue that is close to our heart. Ifti, you already pointed out to the historical background to this. We are, for example, working still on the DSA, very fruitful discussions with the law minister. And so this is something we will continue. There will also be a continuation of small projects with human rights activists and actors through our NGO program. So this is something, of course, close to our heart as well. I have to say we are planning a number of important meetings in the fall, which unfortunately I will not be able to participate in myself. There are the diplomatic consultations coming up. There is our joint commission. But I think what we really want to do is to, in the coming years, look more at Bangladesh as an important geopolitical actor, especially in the Bay of Bengal and the larger Pacific, rather than only looking at the prisms through development and GSP. For that, I said I was also going to say a little bit something about where we are on the new GSP regulation. We're almost ready with this new instrument. I mean, the current GSP regulation, as you know, will expire on the 31st of December 2023. And the adoption on the new regulation is foreseen already on the 22nd of September 2020, this year. So this is going to be news very soon. So what are the scopes of this new regulation? I mean, when we talk about GSP, it's of course comprises standard GSP, GSP Plus, and the EBA. We want to maintain these current three arrangements as part of the overall architecture. So this distinction will continue in the new regulation. It also will maintain a positive conditionality. For example, the obligation to ratify and implement the conventions that are listed, but for GSP Plus countries only. But it also will extend the negative conditionality. So there we're talking the possibility of withdrawing preferences for all arrangements, including the EBA. And we saw that already Cambodia has been subjected to this, but only in cases of serious and systematic violations to conventions on environmental protection and good governance. So that is new, because currently the current GSP regulation only applies to human and labor rights conventions, whereas the new regulation will also be extended to environmental protection and good governance. And I think that is also good for Bangladesh, because we will, in case we see that there is environmental protection will not be done, then we have more means at our disposal really to put pressure. And in the end, I think that is a good thing. So there will be the transition period. I will not go into the nitty-gritties of that. The re-applicants of GSP Plus will have a grace period beyond 31st of December. The monitoring cycle we have now, we have a 2-year monitoring cycle, will be extended to 3 years. So of course, for Bangladesh, I think with the graduation that is on the cards, I think it is important for Bangladesh to follow this very in detail, because GSP Plus will probably be the way forward. So that is just, I will now step up, because otherwise I will not be able to remain in my 30 minutes. So yeah, these are important parts, but let me come back again to the issue of the more geopolitical aspect of our cooperation. I think there is a lot we can cover. We should be, and that is always what I've reported back to Brussels, and I hope that this will also be part of my legacy, is to see Bangladesh more and more as an important actor, not only in the Bay of Bengal, but due to its strategic position, also part of the Indo-Pacific Strategy, and looking at how we can work together as like-minded partners in all the areas that also IFTI has mentioned, rather as firm believers in multilateralism, the greater global goods, etc. So with the Indo-Pacific Strategy, what we know that there is, we all have a major stake in the Indo-Pacific, because what do we mean when we talk about Indo-Pacific? We're stretching from East Africa to the Pacific. There are a couple of member states that are already more advanced than us, notably France. I mean, France has, of course, dominions overseas that are part of its territory that are in the Indo-Pacific. So there is this extra push in which they're very interested. And France is also going to launch a major conference on the Asia-Pacific in February next year, when it has the EU presidency. Why is it so important? I think, well, we know it creates, the Indo-Pacific creates about 60% of global GDP, 2/3 of global growth. It's the second largest destination for EU exports, and it's home to 4 out of the top 10 EU trading partners. And by 2030, it is expected that about 90% of new members of the middle class will come from this region. Of course, amidst all this dynamism, as IFTI has also mentioned, the regional order is increasingly challenged. There is, of course, the US-China geopolitical competition that is intensifying, and it's leading to a rise in power politics. And at the same time, of course, especially Asia's security architecture still remains work in progress. So in and around Europe, there are also many security challenges. But of course, over time, we have become more used to mature frameworks such as the EU and NATO, which are acting as poles around which engagement and ground rules and alliances are framed. And of course, you said it, speaking from Singapore, in Asia, of course, there is the ASEAN-centered organizations, including the ASEAN Regional Forum, of which the EU is, I have to say, a proud and active member, guiding the security cooperation. But we also see a growing role for the Quad and China-led frameworks. And there is a sign that this region has a strong regional military buildup. Just to give you also an example, the Indo-Pacific share of global military spending increased from 20% in 2009 to 28% in 2019. And in the midst of all this, democracy and fundamental freedoms continue to be under attack, as we have seen most recently in Myanmar. Again, with Bangladesh bearing the brunt, with no very rapid end to the Rohingya crisis in sight, unfortunately. So economic growth and stability of this region, of course, rests on openness, on stable and shared rules and shared security. And this is really the EU's core interest, to keep the regional order open and rules-based. And we believe we can contribute a lot. And this is recognized also, I think, by many of our regional partners who view the EU as trusted and more reliable than other actors. Again, to just cite the example of COVAX on vaccine multilateralism. So this is the best way to ensure the supply of safe vaccines to low and middle income partner countries. So what do we actually mean with our EU in the Indo-Pacific strategy? So the watchwords here are pragmatism, flexibility, and to be multifaceted. And it's open to all partners wishing to cooperate with the EU. And I think what differentiates it from other powers that also look at the Indo-Pacific is that it's not really an anti-China approach. We do not define it that way. Some of the member states who have already developed their Indo-Pacific strategies, as France, Germany, and the Netherlands, they also deliberately stress that the cooperation is open to all. And so in this sense, it's also consistent with the EU's 2019 strategic outlook on China, which defines China both as a partner, but also as a competitor and systematic rival, depending on the issue. So we're not at all excluding China from this. And I think it is a little bit maybe comparable to Bangladesh's approach towards China and India, which has been very astutely, very, very balanced. So the central plank of our engagement with the Indo-Pacific is really connectivity. We favor, again, a sustainable and rules-based approach to connectivity, which we believe is in line with what our regional partner wants. And if it comes to connectivity, there are, of course, the popular perceptions and reality. And of course, I'm referring here to the Belt and Road, which is seen as the big investment from China. But let me recall that in the 6 years between 2013 and 2018, the EU provided 410 billion euro in official development assistance worldwide, compared to China's 34 billion in the same period. So we look at these two figures, 410 billion and 34 billion. Also, the EU is by far the largest source of foreign direct investment, with a total stock of 11.6 trillion euro compared to China's 1.9 trillion. So again, it's more than 10 times. So the EU is already a connectivity superpower, and we're ready to step up our own cooperation with all the countries in the Indo-Pacific to do more and to do more together. Of course, the heart is ASEAN, that goes without saying. But also, for example, in the security architecture, there is one project which we're also looking at whether we can do something with Bangladesh. It's called CRIMARIO, and it's a project that addresses critical maritime routes in the Indo-Pacific. We already did that in Africa, and it's basically to make maritime routes more secure against piracy. And there is something we're in discussion at the moment to see whether this can be extended to Bangladesh. Then beyond connectivity and security, of course, there's climate change, biodiversity, research, innovation, digitalization. So this whole strategy is the further proof of our commitment that we want to continue to work with our like-minded partner in this turbulent world. And I think here, of course, Bangladesh will have an important role to play. And if there's one thing I'm going to take back to Brussels is to keep Bangladesh on the agenda here. Very often it's overlooked. Very often people tend to look indeed at ASEAN or our strategic partners. And while I'm aware that it's maybe not yet the case to do a strategic partnership with Bangladesh, at least we need to keep it on the agenda, look at the Bay of Bengal as an integral part of our Indo-Pacific strategy, and build on these political and geopolitical dynamics. And just to end here, my future role in 2 weeks' time, it will be going back to the External Action Service. I will be heading a small division looking at regional cooperation with Asia. In my portfolio is the set Indo-Pacific Strategy, also ASEM, and Bangladesh is of course also a member of ASEM, the Asia-Europe meeting. There will be the big summit in Cambodia in November, so there's going to be a lot of work on that. Unfortunately, not really the bilateral geographical portfolio, but I think I will have enough opportunity to really take, first of all the knowledge and experience I've gained thanks to being here in Bangladesh, and to make sure that Bangladesh is will be kept high on the agenda. And so please let me also just end here by saying that I'm grateful to Bangladesh. I'm grateful that I have been posted here. It was one of my preferred countries, so I never cried. I mean, this is always a bit of a cliche, but I'm sure I will leave with a heavy heart. And I have made a lot of really close friends. Many of you are sitting here. And I think the good thing also about connectivity is that we can remain in touch through these platforms. And please also know that if any of you come to Brussels, you're welcome to stay at my place. We'll be so happy to host you. And so let's stay in touch. And I'm ready to of course, continue the discussion and reply to your remarks or comments or questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Rengie. It was an excellent presentation. It was a huge challenge, of course, to put collapse the entire EU program, as you did in your presentation, within a space of 13 minutes, and also touch upon the region, which you did very, very well. I'm also very pleased that you are going to a desk which will be a continuation of, in many ways, of what you have done here. You'll focus on a very important area, Indo-Pacific. You'll do very well to focus, of course, as you say, on pragmatism, flexibility, and multifacetedness. With regard to security architecture, of course, let me just underscore that there is always a certain amount of wariness on the part of many of our countries, not to be drawn into any conflictual relationships with any of the major protagonists of the world. As you very well know in your very long stint as ambassador, that we are focused on development. And that is what we want to expend our resources on. You've never cried, of course, but I'm sure as you leave 2 weeks from now, a little bit of tear will let you down. Okay, all right. So we will now continue with our program. Next speaker, by the way, each speaker will speak for 10 minutes henceforth. I shan't take up any time introducing all of you, because all of you are very well known to start with. And in any case, you have been formally introduced in the brochures. I will begin now with, of course, Dr. Devapriya Bhattacharya, Distinguished Fellow of Center for Policy Dialogue, distinguished and stressed.
As distinguished as you are of the Cosmos Foundation, Honorable Chair and Dr. Iftikhar Chaudhry, it's always a pleasure to speak under your guidance, because I have had the good fortune of serving under you. And also, I want to thank my good friend, Inayatullah Khan, the chair of the Cosmos Foundation and a good friend. And let me say that I come to the Cosmos Foundation discussion not to say anything, but to learn. And it is always a learning experience. And today I see it wouldn't be different. I have heard Ranjay Ambassador Ternik's very substantive, well-rounded, multidimensional intervention within 30 minutes. I wish another 30 minutes was available to her. And I can only tell you that she is leaving behind a solid legacy. It was a very important tenure for the European Union during this time in Bangladesh, in a happening country. And I think she can go back home with full satisfaction that she has discharged her duty and putting the Bangladesh-European relationship on a stronger footing in a very, very difficult time. But I must add also that his absence, including his good husband's absence, will be felt very socially. It will be a friend deeply missed in Dhaka. Having said that, let me just start by saying that my grandmother told me that never say more than 3 points in a discussion. Even the most intelligent person will not remember your 4th point. So what are my 3 points today morning? My 3 points are here. One, the first is that an appreciation of European Union as a very substantive development, economic, and humanitarian assistance related partner. My second point is that the future role of European Union as a potential actor in the structural transformation of Bangladesh economy, particularly in the post-LDC graduation period. And the third is the role of European Union for creating an enabling global environment for an open economy for Bangladesh to sustain in the future. So these are the basic 3 points. But then getting into the 3 points, let me make another point. Ranjay have been quite humble in terms of mentioning how important is European economy is or globally or politically in this world. Let me just recall, European Union is currently the 3rd largest economy in the world after USA and China, even after the exit of UK. And it is 1/6 of the global economy. And when I say the size, it is 15 trillion USD. And that is both in PPP, purchasing power parity terms, and also in nominal terms. Euro is the 2nd largest transacted currency now in the world. And we should all also remember, I won't go into the full details, but we should also remember there are a lot to learn from European Union, from their COVID-19 confronting policies. It has shown that how European society and economies are inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. And because of the public services, what they have rendered, and also in the vaccination issues. Europe will soon come back into full form, if not by the end of 2021, but the end of 2022 in almost everybody. So we should appreciate that the relationship with the European Union is very, very critical for any emerging economy as we move forward. Now let us come to the, I won't go into the European Union's COVID recovery plan and what we need to learn. The 5-point strategy which they have laid out is equally valid for Bangladesh, starting from accelerated digitalization to global partnership in cooperation. I leave that out for the time being. So Bangladesh as an economy needs to appreciate European Union relationship much more strongly. Why? Let me first get into the current circumstances. Europe is Bangladesh's major economic development cooperation, economic partnership, and humanitarian assistance on all 3 counts. So let us see what are the many indicators I would like to pick up. Regarding exports, with my good friend Rubana over here, I don't have to tell much. The European Union at this moment provides possibly the best possible deal in duty-free, quota-free market access for our products, particularly for the apparels. 45% of total export of Bangladesh goes to European Union. We have to appreciate that. 45%, almost half of our exports are destined for European Union. Regarding imports, it is more than 1/3, 38% of our imports are coming from European Union. Look at it. So as a result, European Union is one of those developed country partners with whom we enjoy a positive trade balance. We have a positive trade balance with European Union. That's a great factor for a country like Bangladesh with a balance of payment challenges. Look at the FDI. Ranjit had already mentioned, but currently, if you look at the last 3-4 years averages, a quarter of the inflow is origin or sourced from European Union. A quarter of FDI is sourced from the last 3-4 years. I'm averaging. I'm not talking of the stock. And if you look at remittances, my God, this is something which we should all take note of. That it is at this moment in the remittance, it's only 12% of the total remittance coming from European Union. But mind it, it is one of the most growing source of remittances at this moment. If you look at the sources of remittance in Bangladesh, we have supposedly 13 million people abroad. And if you look at 900,000 people are there in UK, and 800,000 in USA, 900,000 and 800,000. Only 4 countries or 5 countries at this moment, 4 countries will make up 600,000 people of Bangladeshi origin in Europe. Led by Italy, we have 400,000, Greece, Spain, and Germany, all together 600,000. And if you look at the sources of remittances, it is the incremental growth is increasingly coming from Europe and also from the Southeast Asia. So we should not really we need to be mindful. Regarding the ODA, 20% on average, concessional finance, also bilateral aid beyond the member states are providing more than 20% is attributable to European Union. So because the quality needs to be appreciated, you may have higher flow from other countries, which may come in different from suppliers credit to project aid to concessional, semi-concessional hard loans and everything else. But Europe has been steady in terms of providing the concessional finance and etc. Regarding, there are 3 important points. One is the Rohingya Assistance. Only the Rohingya Assistance, if you look at that, in February 2021, we got a commitment of $47 million. And then in 20, we had $96 million. European Union had been one of the major fund providers for humanitarian assistance with the Rohingya. And the COVID support has been mentioned. I won't go into much further details. And of course, the support to the civil society is to be noted over there. So colleagues, I wanted to recall these numbers in order to understand the enormity of the importance of European Union in Bangladesh economy, both in stock terms and also in flow terms, and what it portends for the future. Now, what it portends for the future? The future journey of Bangladesh with European Union is really largely related to our LDC graduation journey and thereafter. So what is happening? The first and foremost thing, and I will be a bit more demanding in this part, we have the everything but arms, the fantastic concessional provisions which have ever been given through the Brussels LDC conference. I was present on that occasion over there. Our current Prime Minister was there at that on that day over there. So it has 3 years of leeway after the graduation. So we can still enjoy duty-free, quota-free market access after 2026 up to 2029. This has to be extended. It is a must. It is a must, and there is a proposal at the WTO on behalf of the LDC groups to extend it up to 12 years. I say 3 years is very low. 12 years may look very long, but 9 years is a reasonable provision of 3 triennial reviews of the CDP provision. And from the Committee for Development Policy of United Nations, where I am a member, we are asking for that. At least that kind of has to be a reasonable one beyond 3 years. The second issue is that EBA, the pharma waiver. The pharma waiver of the TRIPS agreement. If Bangladesh graduates in 2026, Bangladesh will not enjoy the remaining 7 years up to 2033, the pharma waiver under TRIPS agreement. This time period must be given to Bangladesh and should not be penalized for its success. And this is a critical issue in terms of economic diversification and production. So my second request is that we need to give that pharma waiver extension for graduating Bangladesh to enjoy the remaining period, if not beyond. That is another proposal which is already on the WTO. The third issue is the GSP+. The ambassador has elaborated it fantastically. I just want to tell one thing. You see, Bangladesh needs to be looked at, not as a victim where the the support mechanisms are coming. Bangladesh is one of the rare countries which have made good use of the international support measures. So by making good use of the international support measure, it should not really deprive itself from subsequent support. So it should be looked upon as a classic case of resilience and structural transformation in making. So the point on pharma waiver on the GSP+, my point is that look at Cabo Verde, one of the former LDCs, which really could negotiate some derogation and exemptions, including in the areas of eligibility criteria, on the rules of origin, on the issue of double transformation. I'm not really challenging the double transformation. And also on sustainability requirements regarding the ratification and others, and remaining mindful about what has happened to Cambodia. I think there is an opportunity. This is the political moment when the new GSP Plus is being put on the table to the political masters. I think with Ranger back in Brussels, this is an immense help for us to pursue that negotiation in the right spirit over there. I have two other issues over here. You see, Bangladesh in the post-graduation period has to go a significant structural transformation and economic diversification. And for that, the three major areas I see support from European Union is: one, for institutional reforms; two, in the case of setting new regulatory standards and including intellectual property right issues; and three, for productive capacity building and diversification beyond the garments and maybe within the garments as well. Three major areas: institutional reforms, regulatory competencies, and productive capacity building, the three areas over there. And the two other issues which should complement this together is: one is remittances, which has a significant poverty alleviating, consumption enhancing relationship. So the documented Bangladeshis in Europe will continue to send more money, and we see it as a major area of support for financial reform, financial inclusion. The second part is that all the history of graduating LDCs show that as the ODA falls, the role of FDI increases. So the future of Bangladesh in its structural transformational journey is linked with the FDI, continued FDI flow, and much more qualitative greenfield investment, not reinvested profits, but not only in reinvested profits, but greenfield investments in new areas and as it goes. I want to conclude this part by saying Bangladesh needs to prepare itself. Ranger had been quite, as friend, didn't mince much words, but let me be very direct and clarify this point. If Bangladesh wants to take full opportunity of the European Union benefits, then it has to prepare itself. It cannot just negotiate on the diplomatic table, but do not make any changes on the ground. It will have to ensure workers' rights. It will have to ensure freedom of speech and also access to access to information association and others. It has to implement the UPR, Universal Periodic Reviews decisions. It will have to take note of the issue on the DSA and involuntary disappearances of people. It will have to create an inclusive civil society space. If we do not take note of these things and only think that we can negotiate economically, I think we are missing the point. This is European Union, nobody else. They value standards, they value human rights, they value good governance. We will have to take this one very seriously. Colleague, my last point to you in the future, and it's very brief. While European Union is a great supporter for Bangladesh in the global arena in this very disturbing moment, in this very unsettling moments. People are complaining that European Union is not punching according to its political weight at this moment. I would partly empathize with that, particularly with the Afghan crisis now unfolding. We are seeing that. But I also appreciate that it has now internal distractions from countries like Hungary and Poland. It has regional distractions from countries like Belarus and others. So I see that point. But nonetheless, I see European Union as the biggest friend in the global arena for Bangladesh, one of the biggest friends. Well, I have learned from the diplomats that never say only biggest friend, you have to say one of the biggest friends. So, okay, so what are these? First and foremost, European Union believes in inclusive multilateralism. This is very critical. Multilateralism, not per se, but inclusive multilateralism. Second, European Union recognizes special and differential treatment to the developing economy, and in particular, the LDCs and graduating LDCs. It talks about equal, but not necessarily full reciprocity in these cases. Three, it has a pro-climate action approach, which is very important, the green transformation in both in mitigation and adaptation. And last but not the least, the geopolitical interest, which the ambassador has kindly explained very elaborately in the Indo-Pacific and the Bay of Bengal issues. But how it means, what it means is a different issue. Colleagues, I want to tell you today had been a fantastic morning. I have learned a lot from the outgoing ambassador. As I say, I let her go with a mixed feeling. And it was an extraordinary opportunity also to see Dr. Zaidi Sattar after a long time. He is so good now. I often meet Ambassador Tariq Karim and learn from him, his wisdom. Good friend Dr. Rubana Haq is here. And of course, my younger brother Imtiaz is here. I am pretty sure he is going to stir up many discussions over there. And I thank you very much once again for inviting me. Sir, thank you for chairing this occasion.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the fact that you have contributed to what you have yourself called a fantastic morning. As Renia leaves, I'm sure she will bear in mind the many points, not just the three, by the way, that you have made, particularly with regard to the post-graduation market access extension. Your idea of this 9-year golden mean is a good one, I think, between 3 and 12. And the other thing about the farmer waiver and GSP plus, the mention of a Capo Verde as an example was a very good one, I think. So all these will be borne in mind. And in particular, your grandmother will know that your fourth point, which is the criticality of a European Union to the developing world, has also been remembered. I will now move on to good friend, Rubana Haq. Rubana has also something to her credit to congratulate her for. She is poised to leave on a fellowship to Harvard and the New York University. If many of you are not aware of it, Rubana, congratulations on that. She is, of course, has been a splendid leader of captain of industry and leader of the jute segment of it. Renia has also referred to her interactions with the European Union, and I've seen that for myself over the last few years in widening and deepening the relationship that we have with Europe today. Rubana.
Thank you, Iftibai, for the introduction, of course, filled with adjectives, and I'm very, very undeserving of any of them. But chair of Cosmos Foundation, president, and of course, fellow panelists, and of course, Excellency Renche Tiering. Thank you. It's a brilliant opportunity to be addressing all of you. After Devopriya, it becomes very difficult to speak because he covers everything in his 3-point agenda. But I could probably start with thanking Renche for giving extraordinary support during COVID. When COVID struck us first, she was one of the few ambassadors who didn't shy away from a responsibility and listened to us, because we had so many knee-jerk reactions from buyers and overnight cancellations. She was right there by our side. Of course, and then it finally resulted on front-loading of the 94 and the 30 million euros for workers who were terminated. And then that program is still going on. So thank you, Renche, for being our friend and support. However, while I start with my observations on your comments, the stress on the environment and good governance, along with the human rights and labor rights in the new GSP, it scares the industry, because many of us are not linked to what goes on out there. So it becomes increasingly difficult for us to be that compliant. So I'm not too sure that if ready-made garments is clubbed with that extra, I mean, you do remember, Enche, that when you brought up human rights and labor rights issues, how nervous we all were. And then when it moved on to now, when it's going to move on to environment and good governance, it's going to be increasingly difficult for us also to comply at 100%. So while you view us as your partner, do kindly remember that it's all work in progress. So we are on the right track. We just hope to be better. In terms of your green energy transition focus, let me also add that the industry has signed an MOU with the Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development, SHREDA, and where we have all agreed that in terms of solar, rooftop net metering will be done. So if EU could partner with that project, I think the industry would benefit, because it's a new venture, and I think solar would help us. And of course, with net metering, it takes it to the next level. So one point is there. The other thing that I really wanted to mention was, Renche, that the industry goes through 400,000 tons of post-production waste, textile waste. And since you know that most of our production is in cotton and knit, so automatically there's a great recycling opportunity there. So if there are any ways of also collaborating with the EU on the recycling, and not only recycling, currently upcycling is also in discourse. So, it's about, we were trying to export culture to the West. And as a result, what has happened is we are now introducing a lot of Bangladeshi designers with their saris, and they're now being showcased in Selfridges in pop-up stores from next month. And there they'll be using the saris and creating dresses. So that's upcycling. So the recycling, along with recycling, there is an upcycling potential that you can actually look into. And because you will be still connected to us as dear friend, we are counting on your ambassadorship for Bangladesh, because you being in Brussels would mean a lot. And you could, like we've always done, track 2 always helps. So I hope that we will continue our discourses, and that we will be there to support you when you need any info from us. Let us also not forget that the prices in general of imports from EU has gone down by 2.43% in between 2014 and 2020, there has been a decline in prices. And also, while we talk about our exports to EU, and Devpriyo has very rightly commented that 50% goes to EU, but what are the products that we supply? We are still stuck with those 5 basic products of trousers, jackets, knits, t-shirts, and lingerie, and men's and women's woven shirts. That's all that we do. 74% of our export to EU are concentrated there. What about product diversification? While we try and diversify, we would still need, again, the image of this country. The country concept of Bangladesh, unfortunately, does not support value addition. Nobody really thinks of sourcing suits from Bangladesh or something better from Bangladesh. If we just take into consideration what we export to what you really require. For instance, you buy approximately $2.6 billion worth of just synthetic women's trousers, and another $2.5 billion worth of men's synthetic trousers, yet Bangladesh supplies less than 300 million of that. And it's not that we are lagging behind with our initiative, it's just that we are not being projected properly as well, because we don't have the means. We lack in branding. So branding is an acute sector. I think it's a critical component of Bangladesh positioning itself in the global arena, because that's where we lag behind most. And Renche, we must, and of course, and Ifti Bhai, I think you could help us actually reach out to the global community and convey the many untold stories of our workers. So while the whole world goes on the sustainability pitch, let's also not forget that let it not be at the cost of livelihoods in Bangladesh. So while one jacket sells for $450, and then when somebody like Patagonia says, please don't buy any more of my jackets, but have them repaired, what is the impact that we have? That $450 jacket is probably sourced from anywhere in the developing country at probably less than $20. So where does that margin go? These discourses, these discussions must come up as much as we concentrate on the governance and the compliance of Bangladesh industry and of the government in general. I think these discussions also need to come up because we need to also pay attention to this. In terms of our graduation, though Devapriya has said that he has no issues with double transformation, we have issues with double transformation. Double transformation is going to make sure that we have enough backward linkages set up in Bangladesh. And we don't have, and the world is buying more and more of man-made fiber and not cotton. And Bangladesh's cotton consumption has gone up to 74%. So if that is the case, then where does Bangladesh stand? Can we afford to set up backward linkages in our country? Like, recently Young One has done it. Thanks to them. But how many of us can actually put up that money to set a backward linkage? So FDI in man-made fiber-based textile would be critical for Bangladesh. And if you can come forward and tie us up with some joint ventures, I think that would be brilliant. Also, in terms of value addition, I did say that we only supply 5 basic products, but Bangladesh has been trying to tie up with a few institutes, especially in European Union, fashion institutes, so that we can have some design direction. So if a collaboration of design input can be provided to Bangladesh, that would also, a great designer collaboration or exchange program would help Bangladesh, because many of us are not exposed to that level of fashion. And today, the fashion is more about being personal taste. Our orders have gone from 50,000 pieces to 5,000 to 500 pieces now. You all know that Boohoo buys 200 pieces now, and they are so big in Europe. So Amazon, everyone has, lesser and lesser of orders to give us and more styles. So, when consumer tastes are changing, when people are buying more athleisure and in homeware, where is Bangladesh going? So more hybrid tie-ups, at least webinars could be arranged so that we can be at EU and at the same time digitally showcase our product ranges. I think this is also required. And nothing much to add, except I would still say that there is a human factor, Renche, which needs to be remembered as well. You do know that while you give us your report card, and I would not necessarily say that it's prescriptive and punitive, but also remember that there are now Bangladeshi garment workers going to universities. These are stories that need to be told, to be conveyed. There are Afghan girls who are right now stranded in Kabul and trying to make their way into Bangladesh and may not be able to, but they are students of the university in Chittagong. So positive stories, Renche, FDI, a little help with our product development, and a little bit of green touch, and of course also a little bit of concentration or focus rather on ethical sourcing. from companies in European Union would help, because you do know what we went through. With $3.19 billion worth of cancellation, this industry really suffered. And had it not been for the generous support of the government with the easy loan that we had, we would be dead. So I would humbly say that, let the journey continue, let the friendship continue, and we remain ever grateful to you for your support to this industry. And of course, we will miss you dearly. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rubana. Excellent. Also, your inputs, ideas about upscaling in addition to recycling, upcycling. I also recall, Rubana, your presentation of the university girls in Chittagong Women's University in Singapore. You did that in Singapore and drew plaudits from your Singapore audience, I recall, on that occasion. I just had a quick question for you. You spoke about product diversification and branding. Now, shouldn't that be our initiative? I mean, we have to diversify, and branding is a marketing function of marketing, isn't it? So how can European Union assist in this?
So we are trying to diversify, but what happens, Iftibai, is for the last 5 years, we've been just going to different trade fairs and everywhere and pitching better products, but nobody seems to be interested. So we have to get them interested in our better products. And we are now converting all our lines into homeware and athleisure, because that's what they're buying. But when I buy maybe a PJ or a joggers from Sweaty Betty or Lululemon at 79 euro, and when I come back and see that I'm supplying a similar jogger to somebody else in Europe at less than $5, that hurts me. Because, when I see the qualitative difference, it's not much. But the point is, we are still lagging behind with our branding concept. And there are no great ambassadors from our end, to basically project what we are good at. So, European Union buys around only 2.66% of footwear from Bangladesh, and they buy around 1.13% of fish and, food, and only 0.24% of vehicles and spare parts. My point is, the industry is also trying to diversify, because we need to diversify now. And here, many of us are trying to go into light engineering. So we need an audience to pitch. That audience needs to be ready for us. And with the help of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course, but also with the generous help of the EU friends that we have, we could be doing a lot better. Thank you.
And the Cosmos Foundation will stand by you on this.
Thank you, Rubana.
Now it's a great pleasure for me to invite Dr. Zaidi Sattar to the mic, friend, fellow CSP, same batch, brilliant officer, brilliant analyst, and some of you may not know, a very good pianist who would keep us culturally sort of infused during following mess night evenings in what we those days are rather called our training institute after Plato's Academy, if you'll recall Zaidi. Anyway, Zaidi, you have the floor. Next 10 minutes, yours.
Thank you, Ifti, for that exhilarating introduction. And thank you for always, reaching out. Sorry that I wasn't able to give you more time. And thank you, Chairman of Cosmos Foundation, Inayatullah Khan. I would have loved to, be a participant in many of your other events, which I missed. And of course, a lot of thanks and appreciation to Renji for having spent 4 long years in Bangladesh with us. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to interact as much as Ifti or Devapriya and Rubana and others. Thank you for a very comprehensive presentation about the EU-Bangladesh relations, where you covered not only the COVID support that you provided, and thankfully you did a significant amount of support, but you talked about the humanitarian aid and even the trade issues. Though that is, I guess, my claim to this particular session comes from my association with studying of Bangladesh's trade relations with EU as well as the other countries, Bangladesh's trade integration in particular. And I'm privileged to be, with some very great names, Devo Priyo, Professor Imtiaz, and who else is there, I think? Thank you very much for giving me this floor. I'm sorry that I do not have the benefit of a prepared speech, so I might be going, all over. So just bear with me. It's interesting when I hear Renji, bring in, talk about all the support that the European Union has done. And it has, in fact, Bangladesh's current status as an economy, and then that is no longer known for its, poverty and cyclone and floods in the rest of the world. International analysts are talking about Bangladesh in terms of the success in significant reduction of poverty, the economic success that has been achieved through particularly export performance, and the fact that Bangladesh is a leading exporter, a world's number 2 or number 3, if you might take Vietnam into account. This is no mean achievement, and in spite of Dr. Rubana's reservations about why we are not getting more diversified, definitely diversification is the name of the game, and it's not just diversification in RMG exports, but diversification of all of our exports. And I'll touch on that issue a bit more once I've got into this. Now, let me, Devapriya has really covered more than 3 points, which his grandmother advised him. So he pretty much covered a lot of ground. So there's very little left for us to talk about, but let me see if I can excite your interest when I say that, yes, the European Union has been the elephant in the room when it comes to Bangladesh's trade and economic integration with the rest of the world. The European Union today, given Bangladesh's current international trades of about $100 billion now, 60 imports and 40 billion of exports. And it was only about $10 billion in year 2000. So Bangladesh trade integration with the rest of the world has gone up by multiples. With the European Union, EU, and I would like to include UK in that, United Kingdom. So let's say we call it the EU plus for Bangladesh's context, not the international. This is the biggest trading bloc integrated with Bangladesh. I think 50. I would say 45 to 50% of our trade now is with the European Union. China and India are the largest. I think they make up about 25% of our imports and also trade, because we run huge deficits with these two countries. Not that our trade deficits are, a problem. It has not been a problem. We have been able to finance our trade deficits, and our current account balances have been pretty sustainable, thanks to our export performance as well as the remittance that we have talked about. So Bangladesh, in terms of external balances, has been quite sustainable. So in European Union has, through its support out of the international support measures, European Union has given Bangladesh the extreme form of GSP, where through the EBA, not only giving it the duty-free access for its imports, including the ready-made garments, which is Bangladesh's mainstay, but I think just as important has been its offer of very flexible rules of origin. You see, you can offer, duty-free access to countries you like, but they can all, these non-reciprocal offers are always tied with rules of origin, and those could be quite inhibiting. In the case of the European Union, the EBA has been very generous for Bangladesh, allowing this derogation, this one-stage processing, and that helped Bangladesh garment exports to really boom. Now, the interesting thing is that, rules of origin must play an important role in these various generous offers of concession and free trade access, because we also talk about global value chain integration. That is an essential part of trade openness these days. In trade in intermediate goods, trade in parts and components of the finished product has been the fastest growing part of international trade. And unless, a trading bloc like the European Union offers more generous and flexible rules of origin, this trade openness and global value chains don't mean much. Please note that Vietnam today is an export powerhouse, all right. But Vietnam, it's the foreign enterprises that really produce and export most of Vietnam's exports. Manufacturing, when it comes to manufacturing exports of Vietnam, which everybody talks about, 90% of that is driven by foreign investment enterprises. And note the fact that domestic value addition in Vietnam is minimal. Vietnam, for instance, has exported $280 billion of exports in 2020 with a GDP of $260 billion. And that surprises many people, but the fact of the matter is that domestic value addition and value addition in exports is minimal, because when it comes to these electronic exports of Vietnam, and 97% of all the ingredients, parts and components come from Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China, and all those places. So let us acknowledge, first of all, that European Union, having allowed this trade integration to happen in Bangladesh, has helped Bangladesh's socio-economic progress for so many years. And we are hopeful that once Bangladesh graduates out of its LDC status, the transition from the EBA to a more competitive, environment for Bangladesh's exports, that will be a smooth transition rather than a disruption in Bangladesh's trade. And the points that have been made by Dr. Devapriya and then also Dr. Rupana, I think they matter, because I don't want to put some, number of years for this transition, but the important thing is that the transition should be gradual and not a disruption. And that's just as important, not because the European Union takes Bangladesh as a trading partner, but the European Union, the values of these EU countries, as everybody has acknowledged, are important in recognizing that Bangladesh society is an upcoming society. Gradually, there's income as well as socio-economic progress, and particularly poverty reduction it has been so significant that, Nicholas Kristof, a leading columnist of the New York Times, in fact, was advising that President Biden should take note of, Bangladesh's experience in poverty reduction. So all of these things are critical, very important. Now, let me just conclude by bringing in this one other aspect that has come into the discussion, which is the diversification. Why is exports of Bangladesh not being diversified, in spite of the fact that European Union gave it all these flexibility in rules of origin and duty-free access? Rubana is concerned about diversification in the ready-made garment sector, but we are concerned with diversification overall. Now, why is that not happening? And let me tell you, first of all, it is not the fault of the European Union or its regime of market access. The fault, in a way, lies in our trade policy regime. We have a trade policy regime which is dualistic. We have one trade regime for the ready-made garment sector with duty-free imports of inputs, back-to-back LCs, etc., starting in the 1980s. We've given ready-made garment just what it needs to exploit or harness our comparative advantage in labor-intensive product, which is the production of apparel. But we have not done the same for the rest of the garment industry, for the rest of the export industry. The rest of the export industry in Bangladesh are actually dual producers. They produce for the domestic market and they produce for exports. When it comes to exports, look at the export of footwear. As Ruwana just mentioned, it's only the European Union imports 2.6% of its footwear from Bangladesh. The reason for Bangladesh not exporting, being very, very much dynamic in its exports of footwear, is because the footwear industry suffers from what I call anti-export bias of policy. When you export, you get a price which is no comparison to the price you get in the domestic market, where the industry is protected with 85% tariff protection. Okay, so the profitability due to tariff and a protected market is so high that exports are not attractive. And that is not limited to footwear. It is also, it applies to agro-processing industries and many other industries that are we export 1,400 products, but those products are all suffering from this, what I call the anti-export bias of policy. And again, if whatever we get after 2026, when Bangladesh graduates, whether we get GSP plus or just plain GSP, the problem will remain unless we simply rationalize our protective tariff structure, which gives which equalizes incentives between export and domestic sales. And until we do that, we continue to suffer from this export diversification problem. And that is a vulnerability, economic vulnerability, that we will not escape until we really put our act together. So I conclude again by saying that the European Union has been Bangladesh's main supporter through trade, not aid. And that is the important point to make. And we hope that this continues even after the graduation in 2026. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Zaidi. Very good, very good. Very excellent presentation. Very quick question for you. I mean, this high tariff wall, isn't that an impediment to FTAs as well?
Absolutely. This is why we talked about the global value chain integration. GVC integration and FDI inflows require your trade openness. If your economy is too restricted for trade, you don't attract FDI. And of course, global value chain integration does not also happen unless there's seamless import regime. So that is definitely a problem that we face. and which is the reason why even Pakistan and Myanmar gets more FDI than Bangladesh.
Thank you. Now I'll turn to Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, friend, also a colleague and associate with whom I interact almost every week on one issue and another, with whom I shared my alma maters, Dhaka University and the Australian National University. And I also recall that during my 2 years of public life, he was a great source of advice and counsel on many occasions. Imtiaz, floor is
Thank
yours.
you. Thank you, Iftikhar. Thank you, Renji, for your excellent talk. It gives us hope that after going back, you will not forget Bangladesh. But that's a big thing for a lot of us. Fellow panelists and Inayatullah Bhai, thank you very much. I've listened keenly, both all three speakers before me, Dr. Zaidi Sakhtar, Rubana, and of course, Deva Priyo. Let me, you have heard the good things, so let me flag some of the tough things that probably you have to flag when you go back. And you alluded to that, our foreign minister spoke about that. Let me flag some of the things, only two things, I'll not go into Deva Priyo's three things also, only two things. There are two things which concerns Bangladesh now. Leaving you can leave everything out. Two things. One is pandemic, and other is the Rohingya. These are the two central things, and they're involved with the political economy of Bangladesh. Whatever the good things we talk about.
What is the second thing? Sorry,
the Rohingya issue. The Rohingya issue. The pandemic, one can imagine, it's the issue of political economies. It's related because quicker a country can get vaccinated, the quicker it can create the image that it wants to throughout the world and get into, kind of a normalcy. That is where European Union is lacking. One, and at the same time, also on the issue of Rohingya, also European Union is lacking. So you have an European Union, and with all the good things that some of the speakers have already spoken, it really, Bangladesh should want European Union to get hyperactive, and the vaccine is very important. We got stuck, as I'm sure you're familiar, back in February when, and it was partly our fault. We had our one source, and that was AstraZeneca, and that collapsed. Well, whole India's vaccine diplomacy collapsed, and more importantly, I don't think it had to do with the spike. It had to do more with India's relationship with the United States, and then we can talk about that later on, maybe if people wants to listen to that. So my argument is it has little to do with the spike in India. But the point here is we hear about AstraZeneca, we hear about Pfizer and Moderna, and of course Sinopharm and Sinovac, but nothing from European Union as we talk about. I understand you have things in the pipeline, but since it has not materialized to the point it ought to, that is where I think probably the frustration of the government and of course of the people who look into these issues. Second thing is more important and is the Rohingya issue. Deva Priyo talked about the value of European Union, talked about the rule of law and governance and human rights. They all collapse when it comes to European Union's working with Myanmar. And I say this because in the beginning it was understandable. When you had Aung San Suu Kyi, it was understandable, though it was a pseudo-democratic, you can hardly call it democratic, of course, with incumbent military officers in the parliament. I don't know why European Union buy that kind of a democracy. It even held the election. It doesn't make any sense because it is not a democracy. When you have incumbent military officers sitting in the parliament, where on earth where do you see in the European tradition a democracy like that? European Union should have been straightforward, should have questioned that, should have said no, unless you make it whole, we don't come. But somehow you went for it, you believed in Aung San Suu Kyi, and now you can see what has happened. February onwards, February 2021, it doesn't make any sense. Because here you are talking about your values, you're talking about human rights agenda, you're preaching human rights throughout the world, including in Bangladesh. You want the rule of law, you want our garment industry to be rule-based, etc. But when it comes to Myanmar, even after the killing of over 900 people, you're still in the same, almost in the same kind of relationship with Myanmar. Well, everything but arms, that has always been the case. Some sanctions with the military officers, that's it. And those military officers never go to Europe anyway. They don't have any bank account, that you have to seize or to do anything. The business continues. You still remain the third biggest trade partner after China and Thailand. And it has not stopped. You have helped even very recently with the debt service payments. Now, I can see the interest. I can see the business interest, So I'm not into this human rights agenda kind of politics or issues that European Union flows into, and some of our civil society people buy that. No, being an IR, I can see, I see only politics. So here, I can understand that European Union is not going to is not going to really pressurize Myanmar to the point probably Bangladesh would be, more what I would say would welcome, they probably would limit their pressure. And it has to do with the business interests. I can understand here, and this is what I think when you can do when you go back to Brussels, is that decoupling the Rohingya issue from the economic interest. Now, how do you do that? Now, the sanctions will not come back. I can see that. It's not that European Union, they don't go for sanctions in the world. They have sanctions in different places with several countries in the world. Bring Iran, bring North Korea. There are sanctions. Even the post-US Karzai government now that we have in Afghanistan, probably you will go with the sanctions following the United States till things develop further. But I can understand with Myanmar, you're not going to go back. But I can easily see, because after all, with 900 people killed, still you have not made a move in that direction. So what would be the decoupling? One is, except Netherlands, none of the European EU countries have joined Gambia openly. Yes, you have welcomed the provisional verdict, but that doesn't help. Because why I'm saying that, joining Netherlands or Canada and openly would pressurize Myanmar. Then Myanmar would understand that it means business. And this is something more important, not only, because you're helping Gambia on this issue, but the whole issue of genocide is critical, because this is one country which has committed genocide, and European Union after Second World War were very, or Europe as a whole was very particular on the issue of genocide. But here, when it comes to Myanmar, you are dilly-dallying. You are even critical of China when it comes to genocide with Uyghurs, but somehow in Myanmar, it's not there. So it's more than that. If people or academician scholars would want to, if they want to take Europe seriously, Myanmar is like a test case. And I see that it's getting eroded day by day. And people at one point I would not take seriously. And then it's Europe's interest would get hurt. So that's my point. You don't have to do it for the Rohingya, you have to do it for yourself. The second one is helping, the other way you can decouple is helping the Rohingya diaspora form a a civil entity. Because in Europe, you have a good number of Rohingya organizations. I'm sure you're familiar. There are a couple of them in Germany, there are a couple of them in UK, in France. Because the Rohingya diaspora in Europe is quite active and very intelligent and well placed. Let me put it that way. It's not disempowered fishermen that we have in Bangladesh at this point. So even if if you go by, because what is happening now, everybody's talking about ARSA, and then immediately you give a bad name of Rohingyas organization. And we are yet to see a civil entity coming out of it. And they should negotiate, because I've always said after this time with the Exodus that it is not a bilateral issue. A moment a country commits genocide, it never remains bilateral. It becomes international by its definition. So I think it's time that European Union should get together, should actually convene an international conference. And it would be interesting to have the Rohingyas participate, and that from that conference to form a civil entity who will then go from country to country, wherever European Union has influence, whether it's India and Japan. Because the important part in Myanmar's geopolitics is they have three countries literally in their pocket. They have China, they have India and Japan. But you decouple China, you decouple India and Japan, immediately Myanmar would feel the pressure. So there are many ways of doing this decoupling and then making yourself regain the kind of good things that Debokriya pointed out in the beginning of which comes from post-Second World War European politics. But unless you go by doing that, whatever you are saying in terms of good governance, in terms of human rights, people who just smile at you will say, oh, that's a good thing. But the moment you leave the room, they'll say, come on, you is not serious. So my point here is, it's good that we have you back in Brussels so that you can actively, and you know so much of the Rohingya issue. You have seen the suffering of the Rohingyas. You have seen the genocidal condition, let's put it that way. And it has nothing to do with killing. The very point is, it's intention to destroy. It is as simple as that. And you can see, and you've seen in your own eyes. So before you take, I understand GSPs and other things are very important, but I'm talking about the human lives. If you can, and I would request you, if you have time, before going back, visit one more time so that you talk to them, see them again, at the last minute, and you can go and say, Brussels, look, last week I have seen the Rohingyas, and this is their fight. And look at the pandemic, how so far at least, how they have managed. And that's incredible. That story also has to go, because a lot of people have negative news on those things, including the Bhasanchar kind of thing. I don't want to go into that. I'll stop in a minute. I'll stop in seconds by saying that, Randy, thank you very much. I'm very confident that as you go back, you've been a good friend to Bangladesh throughout your time. And I'm sure some of the things that have been pointed out, you will take them back and change things. And then we continue our friendship with you forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imtiaz, for that very impassioned presentation. The point you make about decoupling is very well taken. And you also make the point that the moment it reaches a genocidal level, it ceases to be a bilateral relationship. Some of these points, of course, are better addressed to the presidency of the European Union and probably the High Representative, but and Renia probably reports to the Commission. But in any case, she will be able to take it to Brussels, and obviously she'll be debriefed on this. And I'm glad that we are having this discussion at a point in time which will be fresh in Renia's mind when she goes for her debriefings in Brussels. I have very great pleasure now in giving the floor to Ambassador Tariq Karim, a mentor in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, one of those very few people still in active life who are senior to me and still constructively engaged in thought leadership in the community. Ambassador Tariq Karim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ifti, for your very kind remarks. Thank you, Inayat, for inviting me again to one of these very, very constructive and very, very
You are
useful.
our advisor.
Well, some advisors choose to not do anything at all. And being in such distinguished company and all friends, I'm very fortunate to say that they're all friends, it can be very humbling also. I don't, like Zaidi, I don't have a prepared speech or a talk. I very seldom do. It's a stream of consciousness, let me say, a reaction to everything that comes in. So in a sense, for all of you learned people, it might appear to be bringing the conversation down from the sublime to the ridiculous, but please bear with me. Renze, you have been truly a very, very good friend. We've had many conversations tete-a-tete together. And in a sense, I found a kindred spirit in you in the way we looked at the world and many of its problems. So you know where I come from. Let me start with where Ifti started the discussions at the onset. Europe's contribution to the world. And the two things that Europe gave to the world were one, the Westphalian state paradigm, and the second, the concept of regional cooperation. Both has, in its own sense, triggered off waves in the rest of the world. Europe, I have been somewhat disappointed over the last 40 years of my association, did not quite take up the mantle that it had inbuilt in it of asserting itself more in the global arena, although it is, in a sense, as a collective, the third superpower of the world. It sort of shied away. You have flexed your economic clout, your economic capacities. You have helped countries in institution building in this terms of social development and improving the social indices, whether in the marketplace or elsewhere in governance. But you have shied away from the power that comes in exercising the political clout that comes with you as a size. Yes, you are 27 nation states, but in a sense, even though you're not configured in the Westphalian paradigm as a federation like the US is, or the anti-federation that China is, you have that clout, you have shied away from using it. That perhaps I had hoped that at one point, even 20 years ago, I thought that Europe was emerging as the collective middle point, which would be able to balance off the two superpowers contending with each other. That just did not happen. You chose to abstain from that, taking on that role. Perhaps it's time that you reassess that. You mentioned about the foreign minister's critique when he spoke to you. I saw that yesterday in the papers. In a sense, and Imtiaz repeated that, in coming round to the close of our discussions. In a sense, it's correct. Because in a sense, perhaps your experience with the African world has been much more intense and close than it has been with the other worlds. You have not been like the Anglo-Saxon powers or some of the Latin powers who have been involved with South Asia as much or with the Asian continent as much as you and some European powers have been with the African continent. But let us not forget that when you are engaging with Africa and focusing your attentions and resources there, you are dealing with an entire continent which has a total population of 2.16 billion. But if you are dealing with Asia, it is much larger. But if you are dealing with South Asia alone, it has a collective population of close to 2 billion. This is a much more, Africa is a huge continent by itself. And then you imagine that this close to the same population is crammed in a space half the size or less than half of the African continent. What does it denote for world peace, for world stability, for regional peace? You have to take that because this is a very different world from what it was 50 years ago. And right now, where we are located, and I've mentioned this earlier, ad nauseum, I will not be shy of mentioning again. Bangladesh position where it is has two huge problems ready to explode in its face. There's Myanmar, and now there is Afghanistan. These two alone could destabilize this entire region, and it will have repercussions from in Southeast Asia. It will have an impact on the relative security where IFTI and Inayat are sitting in today. It will have a lot of repercussions globally. Because what happens after the implosion will be an explosion, and what happens with the explosion will go out in all directions. So, in a sense, I support Imtiaz's the point that he makes at the closing, but I will say it more gently that you need to reassess your role, not just globally, but also your role in South Asia. Or in Asia, take Asia and then take South and Southeast Asia. When you mention Indo-Pacific, in a sense, Bangladesh and the European Union are in similar positions. The attitude that you have to the two competing narratives that come and meet. And when you say Indo-Pacific, at the heart of the Indo-Pacific is the Bay of Bengal. That is what actually connects the Indian Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. That did it historically, not just for centuries, it did it for eons. And suddenly, for geostrategic reasons, certain big powers have started focusing on it because of various issues related to the economic and strategic well-being. So it is something which I think it is in European own interest to look at more closely, to devote more time and attention. I empathize with the comments that Rubana makes coming from where she is and representing the industry that she has, that don't press down so hard on our many warts and blemishes. Also, take a look at the many good things that we have. Yes, but in a sense, let us not forget that all of Europe, all the European powers, where the Industrial Revolution started first with the invention of the steam engine and the bringing coal and steam together, you were there. You have done that. You have been there. You have come out of it. What I would say is share the experiences of how you came out of it. Do it not in a hectoring manner. Do it in a sharing manner. Share the experiences. We also had sweatshops. We also had lack of human rights. We had lack of this, that, and the other. What enabled us to come out of it? If you approach a student in that manner, the student will probably be more receptive to what you're telling than if you're trying to take a stick and beat it down on his back. Number three, I think the Westphalian model is, as far as I'm concerned, for most of us living in this part of the southern hemisphere, let me say the global south, is an imported model. It's a model which we chose to import. Like in Bangladesh, if you drive along the highway, the streets are lined with trees, with flora that have been imported from other countries. They're beautiful. But I saw the same phenomenon in South Africa, where they suddenly woke up to the fact that Europeans who had imported tree for beautification of the major cities were eating 60%, gobbling up 60% more water than the indigenous trees was, and South Africa was water-starved. Okay, so transplanting ideas is good, but when you transplant it and it goes to a new pH factor where the soil is not conducive to it, it doesn't work in the same way that we hoped it would work. That, I think, has one of the major disconnects between what we... So everybody talks of the new world order that emerged after 1945. I talk of it as the post-colonial new Westphalian disorder into which many of the nation states that sprung up or were created after 45 found themselves in. We are still grappling with that sense of Westphalia. We are still grappling with the concept of borders where there were no borders, either physically or in our minds. And so we are still very sensitive. Even the larger states feel insecure from the smaller states, as the smaller states feel insecure from the larger states. So you have to help, you have to understand where we are coming from. We are in transition. We will react irrationally on many fronts. Sometimes you have to see how you can guide us out of this phase, help ease the passage or rites of transition. Number three, and I think this is where you have the biggest tool, soft power that you have in your hands. I've been trying to point out to friends over here. This is the most, how shall I call it, the least integrated region in the world today where we are living in. But let us not forget that just about 75 years ago, this was looked upon as the most integrated region in the world. This is something which we did to ourselves. And the narrative that we spawned that 3.5 decades ago has completely overshadowed and nudged aside the previous narrative, which is not a few centuries old, which is a few millennia old, where we were together. We were not nation states, but we had a sense of belonging to one space. We fought with each other, but we also made love to each other. That we seem to have totally thrown out of the window. How do we reconnect? And I think the example that Europe sets is the example that you need to go out and talk to young minds in the schools and the colleges and the universities and tell them that, look, this is what we were. The European Union as a construct started with an idea. You had European cosmopolitanism, the late 18th century, 19th century. It was first voiced by Count Kalergi-Kudirov and Ambassador Aristide Briand. Later on, it gelled. You started with the European economic cooperation, and typically you did that choosing on what would help Europe rebuild itself, because the fruits of the first industrial revolution had been totally decimated by 2 world wars. But the most remarkable feature that I see, and that I have been trying to say, I'm afraid I've not had much success in that, is that it was 2 viscerally antagonistic enemies who came together to say, enough, let's get together. What do we do to bring us out of this morass that we have dug ourselves into? Germany and France. And when I have been pointing out for the last, I think, a decade to people when I was in India and even after I've left, that look at the Franco-German embassy building premises constructed in Dhaka. You have the flags of Germany and France, two mortal enemies less than 75 years ago, who share the same premises. I think even in the room configuration, it's all mixed up. And they have the European flag flying proudly in between. I've seen something similar in another embassy, but those were lesser powers. Here you have the two major powers of Europe displaying it. Can I dream of Bangladesh and India or Pakistan and India or somebody coming together and do something? No. How long are we going to be at that? I remember at a conference in Colombo in 2010, I think Imtiaz, the institute you were shepherding in Colombo, Regional Center for Strategic Studies. There was a Pakistani sitting next to me, a former retired diplomat, and there was an Indian sitting next to me. And I said, look, what will it take us to embark on cooperating? Do we need to fight another world war or 2 world wars to come to that? Okay, then please, gentlemen, you start a war between each other. I guarantee you that within less than 2 weeks, we will all be hollering, no more. But is that the way we should go forward? And that is where I think you need to be more proactive, not just in trying to help us in economic terms and building economic bridges and helping in governance, but sending the idea out that we were where you are today. We went through all these phases. We had abysmal labor rights conditions. After all, Karl Marx wrote his thesis sitting in London. Okay. But we came out of it. Share the story of how you came out of it. Number 2, yes, we were fighting with each other. We had world wars and we had bilateral wars and we had all these things. But in the end, today, we are 27 countries who came together and largely agree on a large number of issues. We still have differences. That's human nature. Every country, every community has differences. The trick between being constantly at each other's throat and being able to live is to be able to arrive at a pragmatic solution which says that, okay, on the whole, we agree on so many things, we can live with each other. We'll work with the others. That needs to go into our education system. And I somehow despair. I mean, in my 3.5 years in Dhaka and the educational institutions here, we have taken the worst aspects of liberal democracy and forgotten the best. We have forgotten the vision. Everything is function of money. It's all quality over quantity. It's all super specialization without being aware of the world around. I think we need a fundamental change. And this is where quietly you can be coming and talking. You don't have to push anyone. You don't have to nudge anyone. Just share. Just have, out of 100 students, 15 students saying, this lady is talking sense. Why aren't we thinking like that? It'll take time. It'll be an organic process because organically we destroyed what we had. We can only reconstruct it organically. So I think I've already exceeded the 10 minutes that I have. There could be many things. This could be a rambling conversation for all that I know, but I thought I'd emphasize on these two which struck particularly. You have been the EU's ambassador here in Bangladesh. When you go back to your headquarters, I think you will also be Bangladesh's ambassador to the EU. And that is where you can help, not just Bangladesh. I'm not looking at it only from the point of Bangladesh. I'm looking at the larger picture where I am, because Bangladesh will survive only if the region that I am in doesn't blow up. And you can help this region from falling into the precipice and committing harakiri by doing exercises a lot of the potentials for use of soft power, which you have so far abstained from using. I urge you to urge your council to reassess the world, because we are, 75 years later, we are almost back where we started, but it's a much more dangerous world today than it was 75 years ago. So I'll end my remarks here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Karim. That was excellent. You made very good use of the time. That was framework was macro analytical, and spoken from the angle of what in Europe you'd call Hochpolitik, the high politics. Well, before I give the floor back to Ambassador Thiering to react to some of the observations made here, I have request from a couple of our viewers here from Cosmos. I have Masood Khan and Nahar Khan. Quick questions from both of you, perhaps. Masood, you go first, and then Nahar. And thereafter, I'll give the floor back to Renier for her final remarks. Masood.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iftikhar. Hi, I'm Masood Khan. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of Cosmos Group. And the question I have today is that while the eyes of the world are focused on Afghanistan, and rightfully so, the Rohingya refugee issue appears to be slipping away from public eyes. What specific steps, if any, is the EU contemplating in this connection?
Okay, Nahar, you have something?
Thank you, Dr. Iftikhar. Excellency, my question is, there's a huge issue of disparity in wages and pay between men and women in Bangladesh. Women also have less access to skill development programs that could provide them with proper vocational and technical training. How can EU support Bangladesh in women's economic empowerment and in bridging this wage gap? Thank you.
Okay, jolly good. So Renier, now you have all the sort of inputs from the discussants as well as the questions just now, and take the next 5 minutes or so to give a sort of a very broad reaction. Mind you, I mean, none of these were addressed to you in person. I mean, these points were made to buttress your position yourself when you go back and report to the Council on Commission. Renier.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think if there's one thing I miss when I'll be back in Europe is especially these type of conversations and this type of intellectual debate, because believe it or not, I will be hard pressed to find the same quality and the same engagement and groups such as I've encountered, not only here in Bangladesh, but also in India and Nepal. And this is what I will miss the most. Secondly, I want to just say that you can be sure that I will come back. I'm already a brand ambassador, I think, for Bangladesh, and this is what I definitely will continue to be. But as Ambassador Tariq also pointed out, my roots, if I can call it, or not only lie in Bangladesh, also in Nepal, where I've spent 4 years before coming here, but many years ago, starting in 1984, on my journey as an anthropologist in Western India and the state of Gujarat, and then extending to Maharashtra, where I spent a couple of years of doing research, especially on migrant labor, interstate migrant labor, also looking at the kind of diversity that India encompasses, which is very often ignored in the West as well. Then when I joined the EU, my field of work was always in Asia and mainly South Asia. So I think definitely the integration that this subcontinent needs is really something I couldn't support more. And I think it is indeed a pity that as EU, we didn't manage to do more, for example, for SARC. We tried a lot. I think when SARC came into existence, we supported the Secretariat. We had a lot of funds set aside for regional integration through SARC as a model that could be, imaged on how we used to work in the EU. There were obvious impediments to this related to the fact that I think basically it comes down to political will, and we all know the reasons why. Unfortunately, it didn't really mature into something much more solid that could be, a model for regional integration. Then came along the BIMSTEC. We saw this as a new maybe handle on where we could focus some support, but then BIMSTEC again. There will, of course, be the fallout of what is happening in Myanmar and the Rohingya crisis, as was very well pointed out by Professor Imtiaz. I also really want to do justice to all the very important comments made by all the interlocutors, and then starting by Deb. Deb always so to the point with all the, I always learn what the EU is doing from you. Huh? It's the world upside down. It's always such a pleasure to listen to you. Maybe, and I hear you when you make a case for Bangladesh that we maybe should give an extension. Of course, these are very, very technical discussions also at the Council, although even, of course, the Commission luckily here has the competence. But in the case of Bangladesh, the one thing I would really also urge you to continue to do is to impress upon the government that some progress needs to be made on the labor rights issue. Because this is what we've been engaging in, and I have to say, with good and positive results, but we're not there yet. And if we want to make a case for Bangladesh, we need to be able to say that we have really reached some benchmarks in in what we now call the National Plan of Action on addressing labor rights. And this is really important. This is really what I would like to convey. Because, of course, the nitty-gritties of these negotiations are led by the Commission, mainly DG Employment and DG Trade. The EU External Action Service is, of course, part of it. And we have always shown that we are actually the advocate for Bangladesh, trying to really also defend Bangladesh's case. But, you have to really be quite determined to take on DG Employment and DG Trade. And very often it's also maybe the officials there lack this perspective again of where are we coming from. And it's true that, whatever has been over the centuries achieved in Europe cannot just be achieved in a country that has been independent since 1971. So this is what we keep on saying, but it's a difficult uphill battle. So here we also need your help in getting this negotiation and to a good end. But I'm positive that we will reach it and that we can continue granting Bangladesh these beneficial trade relations. Rubana, of course, very also same here, excellent what your points, and I'm all taking note. I hear you when you say, why is the Europe still needs to be convinced that Bangladesh is not only a story of the Rana Plaza and the sweatshops. And here I just want to remind the brilliant Nigerian writer Chimamanda Adichie, who in a TED talk said, the danger of a single story. This is what we need to avoid for Bangladesh. And here I find also myself as a brand ambassador, I've always already tried to say Bangladesh is not only about the sweatshop. It is, and Rubana, you rightly mentioned that yes, it will be problematic perhaps for the industry that we are coming with even more conditions like environment, etc. But also let's not forget how many garment industries are already operating under platinum licenses. I don't think they're this is rivaled anywhere else in the world. And I've visited many factories which are state of the art. But I also hear you when I say, what about the diversification? Why is everybody only still thinking about ready-made garments? And thank you in that sense also to Dr. Sattar, because the impediments also from this dual approach by the government needs to be addressed. This is not something we can address. However, I just to give you some anecdotal evidence of how I try to get a different picture across of what Bangladesh is about. If you visit, for example, the ceramic factories, I had the pleasure to go and see Bexenco. And to my amazement, I found out that most of the really high brand China and bone China factories in Europe or brands actually take their produce from Bangladesh. We talk Villeroy Bosch, we talk Taitu, etc. And I posted this on Facebook, and all my European friends were saying, "Oh, really? We didn't know. We only knew about Bangladesh, about the jeans and the garments, etc." So this danger of the single story is what we all need to work on and to try to change this. And it's just, make more use of social media. I think, Rubana, as president of the BGMEA, you're being so vocal. And I think that the articles and the interventions you did in the European press have been noted, but this is really the way to go. And I will certainly also participate in that. For the global value chain integration, I think one thing what is important is that the European Commission is preparing this legislation on due diligence. I've always said that we should also look at the brands. They cannot continue forcing a race to the bottom and at the same time greenwashing what they're doing in Europe. And I feel that is a real problem. Similarly, you talked about recycling. Yes, this is exactly what the Fit for 55 and the Green Deal of Europe wants to achieve. It's the circular economy. There should be much more emphasis on that. It's part of the Green Deal. And through our Team Europe Green Initiative, I don't see why we couldn't help Bangladesh in achieving circular economy or upcycling, recycling in the major industries. And that is certainly something we should be looking at. So that point is very, very well taken. But at the same time, I think the due diligence that actually looks at the buyers and the brands, that is also, there should be more ethical buying going on in these sectors and I guess what is hopeful is the younger generation, the millennials. If I see my own kids, they are much more aware. I think the days of going to Primark was coming back with $20 of bags of clothing, which you wear a few times and throw out, these days are gradually going over. And I think it's also from the EU, we need to make sure that this unsustainable model should really be on the way out. So that was, I think, very, very interesting. So yeah, for the transition out of EBA, as I said, we can't do it alone. We really need this negotiation. And Professor Imtiaz, thank you very much. I mean, yes, I would have loved to see more vaccines coming to Bangladesh already now. Let's see what the future brings. I will definitely continue to make the case. It's, the problem I think with this pandemic is that we're all learning. This is something unprecedented. I mean, of course, we had the Spanish flu 100 years ago, but in the current circumstances, we all learn. We had to learn how to get all our resources together, how to respond, while at the same time responding to a very, very serious situation in many of our member states. And we're still learning, but I hope that we will see a more equitable approach and how to address this pandemic. And then, of course, you rightly mentioned the Rohingya, and I'm totally with you here. I cannot speak for Myanmar because I'm not, strangely how it is. I'm of course not an ambassador in Myanmar. I cannot really go into the details, but I would invite you to look at what the EU has been doing in terms of sanctions. And I can assure you it's not as, business as usual as you portrayed it to be. I think it's always, and I'm not talking about only Myanmar here, the trade-off is always between sanctions on the one hand and the survival of the people themselves. And I think this is what we've been grappling with. For example, why have we never stopped our support for education to Myanmar? Does it make sense to continue budget support? Well, that was stopped even. But what are what will be the impact of the poor? And again, in Myanmar, we are also in the EBA enhanced engagement. But of course, the trade-off is also if you stop the EBA, who will be the first ones to suffer? It's not the generals, and it's not the genocide, the people responsible for the genocide, but it's the working people, especially the women. So this trade-off is extremely difficult and has to be really looked at. And that's all I can say about it. But please look at how we have now had a third round of EU sanction over the military coup, also looking at the sectors that will be hit by these sanctions, asset freeze, prohibition for making funds available to also entities. So, I mean, there are things going on. It's not always easy, but that's, nobody is perfect, but we're trying our best in this sense. But I think it's a good idea, what you said about an international conference and to really help the Rohingya diaspora. I think not enough, I totally agree, has been achieved for that. And helping them to create a civil entity is, I think, an excellent idea and something that we should really consider. And this is also something I will be taking back to Brussels. So thank you for this, and let's keep in touch on this because we need your inputs as well, because you continue to be here. You see how also the negotiations between Bangladesh and the junta in Myanmar will be going at a certain moment, and we would need to know what is going on in order to best respond. So that is why I hope that we really can keep in touch as we do now. And yes, to come back to Ambassador Tariq, again, always thank you for your observations. I think, yes, we have as European Union, it is disappointing that we started as an economic cloud, but you know how difficult it was to actually move from a common market to where we are now. And in fact, when the whole EU project started back in the late 50s, it was known as the European Community for Coal and Steel. So it was even a more narrow approach, but it was important because for France and Germany to trust each other on coal and steel meant that was a huge confidence building measure. And that took time to expand. And let's not forget that the only expansion, as you said, was in 1973 from the 6 founder members to a bigger, to getting along, to taking along a few more member states. And then who would have actually thought that we would have reached behind for the former Iron Curtain? That was unthinkable. As me as a kid growing up, I would have never thought that this would happen, and look where we are. So miracles can happen. So please also don't lose hope on where we can go with the South Asian subcontinent. I tend to be an optimist, but let's see how it will develop. But yes, not easy to move into the political realm, also because not everybody wanted the EU to be a political actor. Not least very often the member states. It sounds maybe contradictory, but here we are. And it took the Lisbon Treaty for us to really make headway in this. And I think now what we will be looking at with the problem of NATO, etc., is to really maybe look at the military side of the EU. We've started with baby steps since Lisbon. There is a military committee. We have a And I think also with the Brexit, this will become much more easy. So watch this space and see how this will develop. But yeah, I think, I mean, I have so much to still also take back and to digest from all your comments that I think I should stop here. But I would wish that we, you know, whenever there is you're hosting other international conferences or local conferences, I mean, we have now seen that this mechanism is useful and it enables us to continue the discussion and the narrative, even from the comfort of our homes and our computers. So please keep on inviting me. It will be really my pleasure. And from my side, I can continue updating you on how the EU is faring and how we're dealing with the region at large, Bangladesh in particular. And I'm happy to continue and to step up my role as an ambassador for this region as well. So on these words, thank you for having given me this opportunity just on the eve of my departure. And again, what can I say? I really will thoroughly miss my time here. Thank you again.
Thank you. Well, the points raised by Masood and Nahar also, I'd assume that they were subsumed in the responses that you gave. Masood's one in the elaboration of the Rohingya. Yeah. Unless you want to say something extra to this right now?
No, I realized that, I didn't address Nahar's question about the disparities in wages and what we can do about it. Again, I think through our Team Europe initiative on decent work, on our support to the government on the education agenda, and the policy frameworks that we try to contribute to, that should hopefully help. But again, this is something, of course, that first and foremost will lies with Bangladesh itself, and whatever we can do to help, we will continue doing. So, sorry, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I shan't even attempt to summarize what has been said. Of course, the adumbrations made by all the discussants and others would be packaged in a way, and Nahar will organize that. It will be sort of circulated. So we hope that even the levels of policymakers, academics, and a much wider audience will benefit from it. And you, of course, will take back the takeaway. Your takeaway would be that Bangladesh is not a single story, as you yourself said. It is a huge compendium of many tales of human endeavor brought together. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Inayat. Inayat, for you to make the conclusions and close the event.
Thank you, Steve. Before I embark upon my closing remarks, Renia, I would like to take this opportunity to ask a very focused question, if you don't mind. With the growing US-China conflict and COVID and climate crisis, and now you see the Afghan crisis, it seems that the Rohingya refugee issue is almost fading away from people's mind. And Professor Imtiaz raised a very important point, which is that the Rohingya refugee issue cannot be just it's a very complex, complicated issue. But three countries which are very critical, namely Japan, China, and India. Without their cooperation, I don't think the Rohingya issue can be resolved. And my question to you is that what EU can do to help Bangladesh resolve this Rohingya refugee issue? And I would like to have a very specific, focused answer.
Well, okay. Back to you, Renia.
I was already unmuted, sorry. No, yes, again, as I said, the power play of these important countries is, of course, something where what we are grappling with as well. And I think it's by continuing our I have good hopes that our Indo-Pacific strategy will give us a handle to be more active and to address these issues much more in detail. And first of all, I mean, finding a political solution, of course, it needs to be found in Myanmar itself. And therefore, it's, of course, very, very tragic that on the 1st of February this year, this coup happens, because how can we reach out to this government without really dirtying our hands? So it has really been an enormous setback. So that is the reality we need to face. So what can we do? We will continue, of course, to support Bangladesh. We're looking, but we of course have been giving since many decades already, because this is not something that started back in 4 years ago. The support to the camps in Cox's Bazar. We're now looking at Basan Chor, see what if there is a possibility to get acceptance to work there. That's not sure for the moment. So humanitarian assistance, yes, definitely. Helping Bangladesh, of course, but the larger political arena is very much informed now by the political developments in Bangladesh, reaching out to Japan and India through, because, these, and China, they're our strategic partners. So what we can do is to make sure it is always on the agenda of our summit statements, and discuss it in the margins, etc. But I think looking at the reality of the dynamics in the Security Council, we have seen that unfortunately, it has not been very, very positive. So I don't have the magic recipe, and nor do I have the crystal ball to see how this will evolve. Inayat, I'm sorry, but what do we? For me, having seen the camps, having visited many times, it will something that is really close personally to my heart. And I will, if nothing else, I can make sure it will not disappear from the agenda. But I hope it won't. And I don't think it will. But you know how the world works. There is we're very, and that's also due to the media, very crisis focused. We will hear nothing else except Afghanistan in the coming months. But that doesn't mean that the Rohingya issue should disappear. And there I can give you my personal commitment that I will keep on following this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if there are no further comments, questions, and back to you again for...
Thank you. Thank you, Renier, for your very candid answer to my question. Thank you, Iftibai. It has been a very fascinating roundtable. Let me thank our keynote speaker, Renier Tering, and all our distinguished discussants for a very mind-engaging, thought-provoking, and insightful deliberations on the prospects for the relations between Bangladesh and European Union. We have had a stellar list of discussants, and each one has contributed significantly, not just to our roundtable, but also to knowledge on this all-important subject itself. Bangladesh and European Union relationship is of absolutely critical importance, and the points that were raised today are a testimony to that fact. We are truly grateful to Renier Tering for her time and most valuable statement. The other discussants, Dr. Debopriya Bhattacharya, Dr. Rubana Haq, Dr. Zaidi Sattar, Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, and Ambassador Tariq Karim, are all owed our profound appreciation for sharing their thoughts with us. Last but not least, praise is also due to our chair, Dr. Iftikhar Chaudhry's skillful stewardship of the proceedings, which has been a key factor in the roundtable's success. The Cosmos team, under Nahar's leadership, has worked relentlessly, and I'm delighted their labor has not gone in vain. Before I wrap up for the day, I would like to make a special request to our participants. We would not like your ideas to be lost. We would like this to reach to a far wider audience, and which is what you richly deserve. And And I would like to request and announce that Cosmos would be very happy to bring out a publication, recording the very valuable, deliberation that has gone on into this 3 hour of deliberation. And for that, I would request and invite each and every participant and discussant to send us a written, text of whatever you wanted to say or add for that publication. And that would be a wonderful, I think we want to capture this. And Renier, a copy of this publication would be mailed to you. So I would again request everybody to try to contribute to this publication. And on that note, I would like to say goodbye to everybody. Stay well, keep well. Sharon, I will not be able to see you, but I will definitely show up in Brussels. And I love going to Brussels.
Fantastic. We will meet. Everybody.
And a very big hand to all the participants and discussants. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you.